this past week. Of course, Gran Turismo 7, Greg, one of your favorite titles, ran into a little bit of a rocky road this past week with some online maintenance, some server maintenance that went longer than expected and basically took down the game itself.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll talk about this more in what you've been playing, I think, but the big takeaway for me was I didn't realize how much of that game was behind an online connection. Holy crap.
Yeah.
I tested it out tonight and it was like, whew. But yeah, I mean, we can talk about it more in what you've been playing because I have a whole thing to talk about there. But yeah, I think the response that they gave was not great. I don't think Sony handled it very well. I don't think Polyphony handled it very well. Downtime on games nowadays makes sense because so many games are a service and they're constantly patching things and upgrading things. And that's kind of the line you walk when you're doing things like that. But, it made sense for them to keep the game down when they ran into an issue with version 107. But the way they handled it publicly it wasn't good.
Yeah.
It wasn't good.
And this kind of thing is going to be tough, especially for a company like Sony that really hasn't had like a mainstream online service game hit. You have GT7 come out, which is a big marquee PlayStation 5 release, and then to have it run into some trouble like this so early on. I mean, it seems like they were unprepared for the PR that needed to come along with this. And then it was sort of on the heels of people being mad or upset, at least, about microtransactions in the game as well.
Well, that's a bigger discussion. And that's, like I said, something that I want to touch on when we get to what you've been playing. But yeah, what you said, somebody tweeted something very similar. And I think it was a really good point where it's like, Sony doesn't have, I don't think they have a ton of experience with games as a service.
No.
I mean, outside of maybe, what was their online RPG?
EverQuest.
And was that EverQuest? And was that even this iteration of Sony? I mean, it was Sony Online.
Yeah, it's Sony Online.
So, I mean, I think they're running into the teething issues and they're surrounded by games released by companies who are used to running games as a service. And that's not to excuse any of this, but you could see it. I mean, it felt like they were fumbling. They didn't know what to do when this happened. Yeah. And what they did do wasn't right. So yeah, it was a rough week. It was a rough week. And I think it's been a rough launch for that game for a lot of different reasons, which is a shame. But I do sort of take solace in the fact that when Gran Turismo Sport came out, it was pretty rough as well.
Yeah.
And we have seen this before, and actually, a very similar series with the Forza games on the Microsoft side. I mean, they ran into a fair amount of issues with a couple of those games, especially I remember some of the stuff that's happening with Gran Turismo 7 is very similar to Forza Motorsport 5, especially when it comes to the economy of microtransactions and the way that Microsoft handled that and had to roll back a lot of things. I'm wondering if Sony's going to do the same thing. So we'll see.
Yeah, interesting. But I guess when your game goes down for over a day and people can't play, that ain't good. No.
Yeah. No. It's all pretty negative this week.
Oh no.
I'm just going to say
no.
So I've been watching because obviously we have a crew that races Gran Turismo. Yeah. And so we were all very excited for Gran Turismo 7. We've all been kind of grinding through it. So it was big news when GT7 went down this week. I said, that was where I learned that the lion's share of the game is locked behind an online connection. And I mean, it's everything.
Which, by the way, remember that time back in 2013 when the Xbox One was going to be always online and
and Sony got loads of applause for not.
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't even realize that. And so that's one of the many problems that this game has had over the last week or two since launch, really. Is that where this was the first numbered Gran Turismo in, I think, over a decade. The fact that there was a huge single player component was a big deal. With Gran Turismo Sport, obviously that launched as an online game, right? Like that. So that made sense. And there was a bit of backlash there. So they ended up adding a lot of single player content to that game, which, by the way, if you, I tried it tonight, if you play that game without an online connection, you can't save anything because your save file exists in the cloud, although there's still a version of it on your system, but you can still access, I think, all of the single player content in Gran Turismo Sport if you don't have a connection. It just doesn't save, but you can still play it, right? So when you fire up Gran Turismo 7 without a connection, or if the network is down, the servers are down, you have access, you can still access every track. You can do an arcade race with a small collection of cars, like pre-selected cars and the AI, and that's it. And you can't do anything against this gigantic single player grind that exists. The map is there, but none of the icons are lit up. You can't go anywhere but to these single events. Or you can do the music rally thing that they added this year, which is, again, it's not really much of a mode. So that's one thing that I learned this week that I was just kind of like, that feels, that doesn't make any sense to me why they would do that. But yeah, I do want to say, like, the game has problems anyway. And there's two major problems with it. And I was kind of trying to skirt around this when I was talking about it last week, because I wanted to, give the game a chance to, and give the developers sort of a chance to fix things. The game feels like it was released about 6 months early. It feels like it's not done. And I do understand that, games are online and that patches are a thing now. And, you're always going to have bugs on day one. Totally get that. And, having been in the software industry and the games industry myself for like the last 2 decades, I understand nothing's perfect.
Yeah.
And you ship with, things that you consider, okay, we'll fix that later. But there are so many bugs in Gran Turismo 7, especially online play. And the thing is the other thing that makes me feel like they weren't really done yet is that when they introduce patches, they inevitably break something else. Like the patches seem like they've created as many problems as they've fixed. And
this is already sounding very familiar to me as somebody who plays an online live service game regularly. This happens almost every single time with that game too. But the game that shall not be mentioned yet.
The difference there is, I assume you're talking Sea of Thieves, but
yes.
The difference there is that that's a game that, where it's an online game. You play that online.
Yeah.
So they're constantly balancing and adding content and everything like that. Whereas Gran Turismo 7 has a massive single player game. But what they've done, I feel like the reason it's behind the DRM is because it gives them the option to fiddle with it constantly. Yeah. And so that's leads to the second part of the problem, which is the economy in this game is so broken. And I think that's what's made everything worse. So and just some history here on that too, is that with, I think it was, I don't think this happened in GT6, but with GT Sport, they added microtransactions. And the way that they existed basically was like, if you wanted a car, right? If you wanted to buy a car and you didn't have the credits for it, there was a real world price that you could pay. You can pay real dollars for something. So it's like, you don't have the credits for this car, or it'd be an option, or you can just buy it for 99 cents. Here's a car, buy it for 99 cents. And I think the highest price you pay for a car in that game was $5, right? That now Gran Turismo 7 has come out, and there were two things that happened. One was in the pre-release review copies, microtransactions weren't active yet. So none of the reviewers got to see what the microtransactions looked like when they were reviewing it. The game came out, that went live. Suddenly the cars, and people have found different examples of this where, like, based on the pricing of the credits, because now you buy credits, the game's constantly asking you to top up. Do you want to top up with real money? Sure. Okay. So based on the pricing of the credits, now there are a few good examples of cars that were $5 in Gran Turismo Sport are now $40.
Oh my.
and to buy the most expensive cars in the game, because again, you're not buying the car now, you're buying the credits to buy the car, $200 for the most expensive car in the game. So that feels greedy, right?
Mhm.
On top of that,
Well, these
so
free to
that
play games got to make money somehow.
exactly. And on top of that, like one of the things that the patch that broke everything was meant to do was to make the economy more stingy. It made the grind worse.
Mhm.
So, because we live in 2022 and, everybody's online and this is a standard thing. People have been doing this since the first Gran Turismo. You find an event or two where it's like, you're min-maxing. Because all these games have been grindy, not at this level, but they've all been grindy. So you find this event where it's like, okay, if you run this event over and over again, you'll earn this many credits and the race takes about this long. So you're making this much money based on X amount of hours, right? It's the most efficient way to grind up your credits. Like I remember when I was at EGM, we covered Gran Turismo 3 that launched while I was at EGM. And there was a great a tip for like, there was an endurance race where I think people figured out that you could get a really super fast car and you could like remap the steering and the acceleration so that the two analog sticks were facing into each other. And then you use an elastic band, a rubber band to tie those together, and the car would ride the wall because it was an oval track. And you just earn crazy amounts of credits by just you put your system down and let it run that race and you earn credits. So like that's normal. So what they've decided is they part of this patch was to bork those events that people had identified as this is where you can make the most credits.
Sure.
So they literally made it so that the payouts are worse, so that the grind is still bad. And it's like, it's just that coupled with how expensive microtransactions are now feels like it's greed, right? And
sure,
Kazunori Yamauchi came out and made a statement after everything was down about why it went down. I'm just going to read some of it. It says that it was a rare issue not seen during tests and development or the QA sessions prior to release. In order to prioritize the safety of the save data of the users, we decided to interrupt the release of the 107 update and to make a 108 correctional update. So that makes sense. That's fine. That's the reason. We apologize. Then he addressed the microtransactions because people were going nuts over it. And he said that he didn't want... What is that? I'm going to say? He wants users to enjoy lots of cars and races even without microtransactions. At the same time, the pricing of cars is an important element that conveys their value and rarity. So I do think it's important for it to be linked with the real world prices. I want to make GT7 a game in which you can enjoy a variety of cars in lots of different ways, and if possible, would like to try to avoid a situation where a player must mechanically keep replaying certain events over and over again.
Sure.
Which, I mean, sounds good, but it's not realistic because here we are a day after and people are already identifying, okay, these are the best events now to grind, because that's what's going to happen. And it's a single player game. Who cares? Right.
Also, has he learned nothing from GT Sport?
Apparently not.
Clearly, this is not the first time that this happens. You have a game, you have a user base who's loyal to your game. They're going to talk about it. They're going to come up with these strategies. Like, there really isn't any way around it. So I don't understand how you then decide to
There's no good reason
make these cars like the idea that you want to reflect real world pricing of expensive cars in a video game is just like insane to me.
And this is the exact same, almost verbatim, the exact same reasoning Turn 10 used when people freaked out about the cost of microtransactions in Forza Motorsport 5 during the Xbox One launch. I mean, almost exactly. And they did finally roll that back. So, and I mean, again, I've played these games for 25 years now. I've had the honor of interviewing Mr. Yamauchi multiple times. I believe that he probably does mean what he's saying here.
Sure.
I believe in his vision. for the game, but it doesn't come off as anything but greed. Like
Yeah.
it feels anti-consumer. Kind of hate to use that phrase because it's so overused, but it does feel that way.
Mm.
And it's because there's so many other elements of the game that also sort of, it's just layer upon layer of like, seriously, you're gonna have to pay for this stuff. Like this is us saying you're gonna have to pay for this. Like, from the fact that the roulette wheels, which used to be like, so you'd finish something called a daily workout, but you would earn a spin. And in GT Sport, it was always a collection of 5. Well, you get one of 5 cars on a roulette wheel. It was usually something you already owned. It wasn't usually a very expensive car. You couldn't resell the car. You'd end up with duplicates. You couldn't sell it back. They've taken that now, and the roulette spins are usually a different set of collection of credits. Usually you will get the lowest amount. Usually 1 car, which if you win, you can't sell for credits. Usually multiple parts for specific cars that you may or may not own and probably will never drive that you can't sell. And my personal favorite is you will get an invitation. So what this is, and I'm sure the internet will tell me if I have this wrong. So I got one recently. It was for Porsche, and it was to buy a very specific Porsche in the manufacturer screen. My understanding is the only way you can buy this car is if you have this invitation. The invitation is time limited. So if you're lucky enough to win this on the roulette spin, I think you have 2 weeks. You have to buy it within 2 weeks. So I won the right to buy this 2.3 million credit car. I don't have 2.3 million credits.
I was going to say, how long do you think it'd take you to get? More than 2 weeks?
It wouldn't take more than 2 weeks if I wanted to sit and grind for it, but I don't want to. Right, I shouldn't have to.
Right.
And and then
but how much would it cost?
Or I could buy it for $20.
Okay, so $20 would be the price.
But they do that. They do that all over the place. Where then they call these legends. So some of the most sought after and expensive cars in the game are in this car dealership that you have to unlock, and it only has 5 cars in it at a time. They're randomized, and that's the only way you can buy those cars. Oh, and by the way, some of these cars are limited stock. I don't know what that means, but it means that when you go there, even if you have the money, you might not be able to buy the thing, even if it's shown up. And it's the same with the used car dealership. If you want a particular car, you have to wait for it to randomly appear in the used car dealership, and it might be limited stock, so you better buy it right away. So there's just multiple, at every turn, they're doing something to push you to microtransactions. And I know we've talked about this on the show a lot. And I know that it's not a subject that we touch on or would like to touch on a lot. But in this case, I have to say, like, free-to-play mechanics in a full-priced game are really, it's a razor's edge. You're really walking a thin line to balance it properly. And in my opinion, Polyphony and Sony have gotten it massively wrong.
Yeah.
In Gran Turismo 7. And
what it sounds like to me is that they've hired people who are into free-to-play monetization in Japan or another industry, and mobile games and console game monetization is exceedingly different because this is not a free-to-play game, and the monetization in it shouldn't be handled the same because you've already gotten $70 out of the customer at this point. What you should be focused on is how to make your most engaged players more happy to spend time and a little bit more money in your game on a constant basis. This is not in the console space anyway. To me, it is not about whale hunting or trying to get people to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars in your game. It is more about offering value, providing enough value to the people who are already there to keep them around, to become people who evangelize your game and bring people into the fold, right? And I'm saying all this basically I'm saying all this as a player who I will probably never spend a dime on this game, an extra dime on this game. And it's not really, honestly, probably not going to affect me because I'm not somebody who has to get every trophy. I'm not somebody who has to get every car. Right. You know what I mean? Like I extract what I want out of these games. But it's still on the basic principle of it, I just can't
I can't be okay with, right?
Yeah.
And honestly, every little piece of this on their own, outside of the DRM issue, I don't really have a problem with. Like, I mean, the microtransactions aren't new. And the type of player that I am with these games, like, again, where I spend most of my time playing these games with a specific group.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we've been doing over the past year with GT Sport was, what we just call fun races, where it's just like, everybody buy one of these cars, we're going to go and race. And it's like, on the off chance that maybe I didn't have enough credits to buy that car for that week, and it was like $2. Okay, $2. Sure, no problem. I'll buy that, But now knowing that would be like $10 or $20, no freaking way I'm doing that. And then again, when you add all those other elements on top, it's like I might not even be able to buy the car, even if I did decide I wanted to spend $20 on it, because it might not be available right now, or it is available, but it's limited, and the game's decided it's sold out. Like, it's too much. It's too much. They've thrown too much on top of it. They've stacked too much bullshit onto the microtransaction free-to-play mechanics. And it's really upsetting. It's really upsetting for a game that was highly anticipated, a tentpole release for them. And
this is the thing that's
to get it.
Worrying about this is that, Sony is looking for live service style games that are going to be sort of blue ocean, can sell for years, right? Mm-hmm. And this kind of thing is going to turn away their most loyal, engaged players. Like, it's just not a good idea to do it this way. Hopefully they'll reverse course. They'll hit the car into reverse, as they say in driving parlance.
Nobody says that, but yep.
And they'll change their ways. But yeah, I hope that's the case.
And the tragedy here too is that for years now, Polyphony and Sony have shown that they really support, like, these Gran Turismo games have long legs. They support them for a long time with a lot of content. So I'm not worried about that. And even the bugs that are there, like the online stuff, again, Gran Turismo Sport, when it came out, was not in good shape. And after a year or so, it was in fantastic shape. So I trust them to do all that, but it just sucks that we have to sift through this to get there.
Yeah.
So it's too bad. And for what somebody in the chat mentioned, for what it's worth, I'm really enjoying what I'm playing of it. Like, it's a really good game, and the improvements are fantastic. There's so much to love about it. It's too bad that it's all being obscured by this.
And also that it wasn't clear what the microtransactions were going to be before reviews came out.
Shady.
Like, that's
shady.
That is super shady.